When I opened the small velvet box that morning, I expected to see the soft glimmer of pearls that had belonged to my mother. Instead, there was nothing, just a hollow outline where the necklace had once rested and a faint scent of lavender from the sachet I'd tucked in there years ago. I stood still for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't gasp. I simply stared, letting the quiet settle around me like a thick blanket. After all, I already knew what had happened. My son, Lawrence, and his wife, Constance, had decided I didn't need my jewelry anymore. That was the phrase they used, smiling like they were doing me some great favor. They told me I didn't need jewels anymore. I remember saying to myself, closing the lid with care. I told them they'd soon learn what they really didn't need, my silence. I kept my voice calm because anger wasn't going to help. Anger makes people careless. I've never been careless in my life, and I wasn't about to start now. When you reach my age, you learn that dignity is its own weapon. You learn that people who take advantage of you often depend on your good manners to protect themselves. I walked to the window of my living room and looked out at the dogwood tree Frank planted 30 years ago. The same tree we'd hung Christmas lights on. The same one he'd sat under reading the newspaper every Sunday after church. It was blooming again, soft white petals reaching for the sky. Frank had been gone for almost 2 years. The house had gone quiet after the funeral, the kind of quiet that presses down on your chest. Lawrence and Constance had moved in to help me out. They said they couldn't bear to see me all alone in such a big house. Back then, it sounded kind. Back then, I believed them. But standing there now, holding that empty box, I realized they hadn't moved in to help me. They'd moved in to take over. I opened the drawer under the safe and checked the smaller boxes. The ruby earrings Frank bought for our 20th anniversary, the sapphire ring I wore to Lawrence's graduation, the thin gold chain I'd inherited from my grandmother. All gone. Every single one. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd misplaced them. I even opened the linen closet, looked under the bathroom counter, as if they might have rolled away somewhere. But deep down, I knew. I walked to the kitchen. Constance was there, humming while she wiped the counter. She turned when she saw me, cheerful as ever. "Oh, good morning, Monica. Did you sleep well?" she asked, her smile a little too wide. I looked at her for a long second. "Yes," I said softly. "Did you move anything from my bedroom?" Her eyes flickered, just for a heartbeat. "Your bedroom? No, of course not." "Why?" "I couldn't find some of my things." "Oh," she said quickly, brushing her hands on a dish towel. "You mean the jewelry? We took care of that yesterday. I meant to tell you." I kept my voice even. "Took care of it?" "Yes," she said. "We donated it to the church auction. It's for a good cause. You never wear that old stuff anymore, do you?" Old stuff. That's what she called it. My mother's pearls. Frank's gifts. Years of love in small, shining shapes. Lawrence came in just then, tie half-done, coffee in hand. "Morning, Mom. Everything okay?" Constance gave him a quick glance, then turned back to me. "She's just surprised. Honey." I told her about the donation. He froze for a second, eyes darting between us. "Oh, yeah, that," he mumbled. "It's for charity, Mom. The church can use the funds more than, well, more than you can use a necklace." I nodded slowly. "I see." They both relaxed when I said that. Constance even laughed a little. "Exactly. You've got such a generous heart, Monica. It's what I love most about you." I smiled back, though my chest felt like stone. "I'm sure you do." They went about their morning like nothing had happened, like they hadn't just stripped away something irreplaceable. I made a pot of tea, sat at the kitchen table, and listened to them talk about errands and dinner plans. When they left for work, I went back to the safe. I looked at the empty velvet again and ran my finger along the outline where the necklace had been. The silence in the room felt different this time. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was focused. That's when I decided. I whispered, locking the safe and turning the key with care. That's when I decided to teach them the most expensive lesson of their lives. I didn't call the police. I didn't shout. I didn't even tell Lydia, my closest friend. This wasn't a story to gossip about. This was something to plan. I took out a notepad from my desk, the same one I used when I handled client books years ago, and started listing every item I could remember. Dates, values, descriptions, even the small engraving on the back of Frank's watch. Every detail mattered. People like Constance think women my age forget things. What they don't realize is that when you've spent your life balancing numbers to the penny, you don't forget much of anything. When I finished the list, I read over it twice. My handwriting wasn't as neat as it used to be, but it was steady. I placed the notebook in the drawer, locked it, and sat back in my chair. I didn't know how yet, but I knew one thing for sure. I was going to get every single thing back. And when I did, they were going to understand what not needing something really meant. Because I might be old, but I'm not finished. And I never, ever forget the value of what's mine. 18 months earlier, my house didn't feel like a home anymore. After Frank passed, everything felt too quiet. His chair by the window sat empty, his slippers still tucked neatly by the bed. I kept hearing his laugh in the walls, his voice humming old country songs under his breath. But the sound faded a little more each week until the silence started to ache. Lawrence came by often at first. He'd mow the lawn, fix a loose board, eat dinner with me on Sundays. Then one afternoon he said, "Mom, you shouldn't be here by yourself all the time. It's not good for you. You need company." I told him I was fine. I had friends from church, my book club, and neighbors who checked in. But he wouldn't drop it. "Mom, please," he said, "Constance and I have been talking. The house is too big for you, and we could save money if we moved in. You'll have us around, and we'll help you out." It sounded sweet, like a son wanting to take care of his mother. Frank and I had raised him to be responsible. I thought maybe this was him trying to honor that. So I said yes. They moved in a month later. Constance came first with boxes labeled kitchen essentials and organization supplies. She was efficient, I'll give her that. By the end of the first day, my pantry was rearranged, half the food labeled and stacked like a store display. "I just want to make things easier for you," she said. "You'll never have to lift a finger again." It sounded nice at the time. Within a week, she had reorganized my living room. My lace curtains disappeared, replaced by gray blinds. She called it modernizing. My old china set went into storage to free up space. She handled my mail and offered to pay the bills online, since she was already doing hers. "Less stress for you," she said. "You just relax and let us handle the details." I didn't argue. I told myself it was a blessing. The grief had made me tired, and it felt easier to let her take the lead. Lawrence was proud of her. "She's good at this kind of thing, Mom. She keeps everything in order." I smiled and said, "I can see that." But deep down, something about it didn't sit right. A few weeks later, I noticed that my dresser drawers had been sorted. My scarves were folded differently, and the old jewelry boxes on my vanity had been moved. When I mentioned it, Constance laughed. "Oh, I just dusted for you," she said lightly. "You wouldn't believe how much dust collects in there." It wasn't just dusting. I could tell. She'd gone through everything. Still, I didn't push. I told myself she meant well. Grief can make you see problems where there aren't any. That's what I thought. Lawrence started working longer hours, or so he said. I saw him less, and when he was home, he was tired. Constance filled the space between us with her chatter about her job, her yoga class, her plans for spring cleaning. Sometimes I'd walk into the kitchen and find her on the phone with her mother, whispering then laughing quietly when she saw me. "Just family stuff," she'd say. I remember one morning when I came downstairs to find her taking pictures of my living room. She said it was for decorating ideas. Later, I saw those same pictures posted online with a caption, "Helping Mom update her old house. Step 1, declutter and redesign." My house wasn't old. It was lived in. There's a difference. When she first started suggesting changes to the guest room, I thought it was to make space for visitors. Then she said, "Lawrence, and I might as well take that room. The light's better, and we'll be closer to the bathroom. You can move into the smaller one down the hall, easier for you to manage." The smaller room used to be Frank's study. I didn't want to sleep there, but they insisted. "It'll be cozier," Constance said. So I moved. That first night, lying in the narrow bed, I realized something. It wasn't about helping me. It was about control. A few months later, she convinced me to let her handle my doctor appointments so she could keep track of everything. Then she added my pharmacy account to her phone. "Don't worry," she said with that bright smile. "You can trust me." I wanted to. I really did. The more she helped, the less I seemed to do. One afternoon, I tried to log into my bank account to pay the electric bill, but the password had been changed. Constance told me it was because the bank's website updated their security system. She'd already paid it, she said, and added that she'd switched a few of my recurring bills to her card. "Easier that way," she said. I thanked her, but later I sat in my chair by the window and felt uneasy. Frank and I used to talk about how independence was like a muscle. You had to use it or lose it. And here I was, realizing mine was fading faster than I thought. Every time I tried to do something for myself, Constance appeared, cheerful, helpful, and slightly patronizing. "Don't worry, Monica. I've got it handled." Sometimes Lawrence looked uncomfortable when she talked to me that way, but he never said anything. He'd just sigh, rub the back of his neck, and mutter, "She means well." Maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. By the time summer came, Constance had a key to everything: the house, my filing cabinet, even my car. She'd borrow it to run errands. I barely used it anymore. One afternoon, she asked about the safe in my closet. "For security," she said. "Do you still remember the code? I can write it down for you, just in case you forget." I laughed it off, but I should have known then. I should have realized that her version of help was slowly taking everything that belonged to me. Still, I let her help. Maybe because I was lonely. Maybe because I didn't want to believe my son had married someone who could take advantage of me. When someone takes over your life in small pieces, you don't notice, not at first. It happens slowly, like rust spreading under paint. You keep telling yourself everything's fine until one day the whole thing falls apart. Looking back, that was the beginning of it all. The moment when my home stopped being mine. The moment when kindness turned into something else, something quieter, sharper, and far more dangerous. And by the time I realized what was happening, it was already too late. It started small, the kind of changes you almost miss because they happen one at a time. One Saturday morning, I walked into my closet and noticed my winter coats were gone. I thought maybe Constance had moved them for cleaning. When I asked, she said, "Oh, I dropped them off at the donation center. You don't wear heavy coats anymore, and they take up so much room." I stared at her, unsure how to answer. Those weren't just coats. One of them was the wool coat Frank bought me on our trip to Asheville. The other had a tear in the sleeve from a Thanksgiving years ago when Lawrence was still a boy. Every stitch held a story. But to her, it was just clutter. She clapped her hands like she'd done something wonderful. "Now you've got more space for new things. Maybe we can get you a lightweight jacket, something modern." Modern, that word kept coming up. She said it when she replaced my lace curtains with gray blinds. She said it when she boxed up my floral dishes to make room for plain white ones. Each time, she smiled that same polite smile and told me it was for my own good. Lawrence backed her up every single time. "Mom, she's just trying to help," he'd say, like it was supposed to make everything okay. "You always say you like change. Just let her freshen things up." But it didn't feel like change. It felt like erasure. I remember walking into the living room one afternoon and stopping dead in my tracks. The family photos that used to line the mantel were gone. In their place was a shiny metal clock and 2 candles. I asked where the pictures went. Constance said she put them in the hallway cabinet to simplify the look. I opened the cabinet later and found only a few of the photos. The rest were missing. The picture of my parents on their wedding day was gone, as was the one of Frank holding baby Lawrence. When I asked about them again, she said maybe they got mixed in with the old frames I took to Goodwill. She didn't even sound sorry. After that, I started keeping quiet. I didn't trust what she might move or simplify next. It wasn't long before she started talking about my wardrobe. "You've got clothes in there from 20 years ago," she said one day while folding laundry. "Some of them are practically antiques. Let's be honest, Monica, when was the last time you wore any of these skirts?" I told her I still liked them. She laughed softly. "You're adorable, but you don't need to hang on to everything. Let me take them off your hands." I didn't argue. I'd learned that arguing only made her double down. By spring, the house didn't look like mine anymore. My floral couch was replaced with a gray sectional to match the blinds. The small lamp Frank repaired himself was put out in the garage because it didn't fit the new style. Even my old teacups, the ones with the faded blue roses, disappeared from the cabinet. Each thing she took made the house a little colder, like she was quietly pulling my life out from under me and calling it progress. One morning, I overheard her on the phone. I was in the hallway outside the kitchen, and she didn't realize I was home. "She's got too much stuff for one old lady," she said. "Might as well start clearing it now before it becomes a problem." Her friend must have said something, because Constance laughed. "No, she doesn't even notice. Honestly, it's kind of sad. She just lets me handle everything." I stood there with my heart pounding. It wasn't about helping me. It was about control. When Lawrence came home that evening, I tried to tell him what I heard. He sighed, rubbing his eyes. "Mom, you must have misunderstood. Constance wouldn't say something like that. You're just sensitive. You've been through a lot." Sensitive. That word stung. I looked at him, my only child, and realized I couldn't reach him. He didn't see what was happening right in front of him. Or maybe he did, and didn't want to deal with it. So I stopped talking about it. Instead, I watched. Constance was clever. She didn't make big moves that people could call out. She made little ones, the kind you could brush off. She'd mention how tired I looked, then offer to handle my bank errands. She'd talk about how confusing technology was, then volunteer to manage my online accounts. "Don't worry, Monica," she'd say. "You can trust me." She said that line so many times that I started to wonder if she was trying to convince herself. I began to notice things missing from drawers, old letters, small trinkets, the silver comb my mother gave me when I turned 18. When I asked about them, she'd tilt her head and smile. "Maybe you misplaced them." I started writing small notes to myself. What was in each drawer, which shelves had which boxes. Not because I was forgetful, but because I wanted proof that I wasn't losing my mind. A few times, I caught her going through my bedroom while I was in the garden. She'd act startled when I walked in. "Oh, I was just checking the smoke detector," she'd say, holding a duster or some excuse. I didn't believe her, but I pretended to. There's power in pretending. I realized something then. When someone decides to control you, they don't storm in like a thief. They walk in smiling, holding a casserole dish, talking about how much they care. They take little pieces at a time, and you thank them for it. That's how Constance worked. By the time fall came, I hardly recognized my own home. It looked like something out of a furniture catalog, neat, colorless, and cold. She'd even changed the smell of it. My house used to smell like cinnamon and Frank's aftershave. Now it smelled like the citrus cleaner she ordered online in bulk. One evening, I sat in the den and looked around. I tried to find something, anything that still felt like mine. But everything had been touched, moved, or changed. That was when I understood something I should have seen months earlier. Control doesn't always come with shouting or demands. Sometimes it comes with a smile and a helping hand. And the most dangerous kind of thief is the one who convinces you she's doing you a favor while she takes everything that's yours. Control wears a smile when it walks through the front door. And in my house, it had already made itself comfortable. It was a Friday evening, the kind of spring night when the air finally feels warm again after months of cold. My friend Lydia was hosting her birthday dinner at a little restaurant downtown, and she'd asked me to come early to help her set up. I hadn't been out much lately, and it felt good to have a reason to dress up again. I decided I'd wear the pearl necklace Frank gave me on our wedding day. I hadn't worn it in years, but Lydia always loved it. She used to joke that those pearls made me look like money in heels. I went to my room and opened the jewelry box that sat on top of my dresser. The latch clicked the same way it always had, but when I lifted the lid, I froze. The velvet inside was empty. At first, I thought maybe I'd moved it. I checked the smaller boxes in the drawer, the little dish by the mirror, even the pocket of my travel case. Nothing. The pearls were gone. My stomach tightened. I knew before I even asked. I walked to the kitchen, and there she was, Constance, sitting at the table, sipping her coffee like it was any other morning. "Constance," I said, keeping my voice calm, "do you know what happened to my pearl necklace?" She didn't even look up at first. "Which one?" "The pearls. From my wedding day." "Oh, those." She smiled like she just remembered something unimportant. "We donated them to the church auction last week. You don't really wear them anymore, do you?" I stood still, gripping the edge of the counter. "You did what?" She finally looked at me, still calm, like she was talking about old newspapers instead of heirlooms. "The church is raising money for the youth program. They'll get a good price for those. It's for a great cause." My mouth went dry. "You gave away my jewelry without asking?" "Well," she said with a small shrug, "Lawrence and I talked about it. We thought it would be fine. They were just sitting there collecting dust." Lawrence walked into the room right then, straightening his tie. He glanced at me, then at her. "Morning, Mom." "Lawrence," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "did you know about the pearls?" He hesitated, eyes flicking to his wife. "Yeah, Constance mentioned it. It was for charity, Mom. You're always saying you support the church." "I do," I said, "but supporting the church doesn't mean giving away what isn't yours." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Come on, Mom. They were just sitting in a box. It's not a big deal." Not a big deal. I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't angry yet, not the kind that makes you yell. This was colder, clearer, the kind of anger that burns slow and quiet. Constance pushed back her chair and stood, still smiling. "You have so many beautiful memories, Monica. You don't need things to remind you of them. What matters is the love behind them." I looked her dead in the eye. "And what love exactly gave you the right to steal?" She blinked. "Steal? That's a harsh word." I nodded slowly. "Yes, it is." I turned and walked out of the kitchen. Behind me, I heard Lawrence sigh. "She didn't mean any harm, Mom. Don't make this into something bigger than it is." I went straight to my room, closed the door, and sat down on the bed. My hands were shaking, but my mind was sharp. They'd taken more than jewelry. They'd taken the last pieces of my life, with Frank, the tokens of 50 years of marriage, of every anniversary and sacrifice. I stared at the empty jewelry box for a long time. Then I placed it back on the dresser, exactly where it had been. They gave away my memories like they were clutter. I whispered. That night, I didn't go to Lydia's dinner. I called her, made some excuse about not feeling well, and stayed home. I couldn't bear to smile and pretend everything was fine. Instead, I sat at my desk with a notebook and a pen. I started writing down every item I could remember: the pearls, the diamond earrings, the gold bracelet, the sapphire ring Frank bought when Lawrence was born. I listed them all, along with the dates, the stories behind them, even where I'd last seen each one. I knew Constance had been donating things for months, but until that moment, I hadn't realized how much she'd really taken. When I finished the list, I stared at it for a long while. Then I wrote one more sentence at the bottom. They think I'm too old to notice. They're wrong. The next morning, I watched them leave for work. Constance kissed Lawrence on the cheek, her nails flashing in the sunlight, polished, perfect, confident. She waved at me through the window before they drove away. I went to my room and opened the closet. The safe in the corner sat quietly, almost mocking me. I opened it and checked the small boxes inside. Several were empty, a few were rearranged. I realized then that this wasn't a one-time mistake. This had been happening for a while, little by little, just like everything else she'd changed. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Constance didn't see me as a person. She saw me as an obstacle, something standing between her and whatever she thought she deserved. I sat down on the floor beside the safe. The cold from the hardwood seeped through my clothes, but I didn't move. For a moment, I wanted to cry, not because of the jewelry, but because of what it meant. The woman my son married thought she had the right to erase my life piece by piece, and he was letting her. But crying wasn't going to fix anything. Instead, I decided I'd start watching. Quietly, closely. I would find out where my things had gone. I would find out how much they'd taken. And I'd find a way to get it all back. I wasn't going to yell or make a scene. That would give them the satisfaction of calling me emotional, maybe even forgetful. No, I would do this the way I'd handled every problem in my life, with patience, precision, and proof. That night, as the house grew dark, I sat by the window and looked out at the streetlight glowing over the driveway. I thought about Frank, about how proud he'd been of me for managing our finances all those years. He used to say, "Monica, you've got a mind like a ledger. Nobody can pull one over on you." I smiled at that. They thought I was weak because I was quiet, but quiet doesn't mean weak. Quiet means waiting, and I was done losing. I wasn't counting what I'd lost anymore. I was counting what I was going to get back. If you've ever had something precious taken from you, a thing, a memory, or your dignity, press that like button for everyone who had to start counting from scratch. Share this so another woman knows she's not crazy for noticing when something's missing. And to those still on the fence about subscribing, you'd stay if this were your story, wouldn't you? When I woke up the next morning, I felt different. Something inside me had settled, not in a peaceful way, but in a steady, determined way. I'd cried the night before, but that was done now. I'd spent my whole life keeping things in order. I wasn't about to let my own son's wife undo that. I made myself a cup of coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and pulled out my old accounting notebook from the drawer. It was the same kind I used when I worked for the city years ago. Black cover, lined pages, neat columns. My handwriting had changed a little, but my head for numbers hadn't. For 40 years, I balanced books. Now, I was balancing justice. I started by going through every receipt and bank statement I could find. Constance kept most of the mail now, but she wasn't careful. I found the discarded envelopes stuffed in a drawer near the desk she used. Some had torn corners where she'd pulled out the papers, but the return addresses were still visible: jewelry stores, estate buyers, and one that caught my attention right away: Harris and Tate Antiques, Nashville, Tennessee. It was a store I knew of. They specialized in heirlooms, jewelry, watches, silver. I'd seen their ads in the paper years ago. My heart sank. I wrote down every date and amount listed. Several transactions had gone through over the past 6 months, each one a few $1,000s. Each payment came from our shared account, the one I'd let Lawrence connect to help me pay bills. I circled the totals, then went through my own notes: the missing jewelry, the timing, the pattern. It all fit. At that moment, I wasn't an old woman being taken advantage of. I was an accountant again, gathering evidence, building a case, step by step. When they got home that evening, I acted normal. I asked about their day, complimented Constance on dinner, laughed at one of Lawrence's stories about work. I let them believe everything was fine. After they went to bed, I quietly took my notebook, slipped my car keys from the hook by the door, and drove to my bank. I hadn't driven at night in months, but I remembered every turn. The teller knew me from years ago and greeted me kindly. "I'd like to print the last 6 months of my account activity," I said. She nodded. "Of course, Mrs. Williamson. Do you want both checking and savings?" "Yes, please." When she handed me the papers, I thanked her, folded them carefully, and tucked them into my purse. Back home, I sat at my desk and went line by line through every statement. There were small charges: groceries, utilities, gas, all normal, but mixed in were payments that didn't belong. Harris and Tate showed up twice. Then there was Nashville Gold Exchange, another red vintage valuables LLC. It wasn't just one sale. It was several. By 2 in the morning, I'd written down everything: dates, amounts, references. The pattern was clear. Every few weeks, something of mine went missing, and a payment to one of those shops appeared. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the numbers. For the first time in months, I didn't feel powerless. I felt in control. The next day, I called an old friend of Frank's, Gerald Dawson. He had been Frank's attorney back when we bought this house. After Frank's passing, he'd helped me sort out a few documents. He was retired now, but still sharp, the kind of man who read fine print for fun. When he picked up the phone, I said, "Gerald, I need a favor, and I need it quiet." He didn't ask questions. "You want to come by this afternoon?" I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "Yes, I'll bring everything." I packed my notebook, the printed statements, and a list of every missing item. When I arrived at his office, a small room tucked behind a downtown insurance agency, he greeted me with the same calm smile he'd always had. "You look serious, Monica," he said. "Tell me what's going on." I told him everything, from the day Lawrence and Constance moved in, to the changes around the house, to the missing pearls, and what she'd said about donating them. He listened without interrupting, hands folded, eyes sharp. When I finished, he took the folder from me and flipped through the pages. "You've done half my work already," he said. "These records are clean. Dates, amounts, everything matches." I leaned forward. "Can we find out where the items went?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, but we'll need more than this. Some of these places might not share information easily, but we can check if anything under your name or your late husband's initials has been listed for sale." "How do we do that?" He opened his laptop and typed for a few minutes, pulling up public listings and estate resale catalogs. Within minutes, there it was: vintage diamond brooch, engraved FW to MW. I felt my stomach twist. That's mine. He zoomed in on the photo, and it's listed under Harris and Tate. Same store from your bank statements. They're asking $2,400. I stared at it, speechless. It was one of Frank's gifts from our 10th anniversary. He'd said, "So you'll always have something to shine when I'm not around." Gerald looked up at me. "We'll need proof of ownership, photos, insurance records, anything that shows it was yours." "I have old pictures," I said, "from our anniversary trip. It's pinned on my dress." "Perfect," he said. "We'll build a file. Every item, every transaction, every date. We'll make a timeline. If this ever goes to court, it'll speak louder than words." "Court?" I asked, quietly. He gave a small shrug. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that. But what she's done is theft, plain and simple." We spent hours putting everything in order. I gave him copies of every page, and he promised to dig deeper. Before I left, he looked at me and said, "Don't let them see you worry. The less they suspect, the better." I nodded. "I can do that." Driving home, I felt calm for the first time in weeks. The street lights blurred past, and I thought about Frank. He always said I had the patience of a saint, but the mind of an auditor. He was right. When I got back, the house was dark. I slipped my notebook into the drawer and locked it. The next morning, I made pancakes like nothing had happened. Constance complimented the syrup, and Lawrence talked about some project at work. I smiled, asked questions, laughed when they laughed. They had no idea, but I did. Every number, every dollar, every missing piece, I had it all written down. And if there's one thing I learned in 40 years of accounting, it's that numbers don't lie. People do. They thought they'd taken everything from me, but what they didn't realize was that I just started balancing the books. From that week on, I moved like someone with a secret. I smiled when they came home, asked about their day, and made dinner like I always did. But when they left for work in the mornings, I started digging deeper. Gerald had given me a clear plan. Gather evidence quietly. He said, "People like her always leave trails. You just have to follow the crumbs." He was right. The first trail led me to a pawn shop in Murfreesboro. I told Constance I was meeting an old friend for lunch, then took my car and drove the hour myself. The sign over the door said Tennessee Gold and Loan. Inside, it smelled of metal and dust. I walked up to the counter and asked the clerk if they ever bought jewelry from Nashville dealers. He said, "Sometimes, depends on who's selling." I described a diamond brooch, gold trim, engraved FW to MW. He looked at me funny, then turned to the display behind him. "You mean that one?" There it was, sitting under bright light, tagged with a price that made my stomach twist. I didn't say a word. I just stared at it until he asked, "You interested in buying it?" I shook my head. "Not today." When he turned away, I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo close enough to catch the engraving. That night, I printed the picture and mailed it to Gerald with a note. "Found this today." She didn't even bother hiding it far. The next day, I checked the house while Constance was out running errands. I opened drawers, boxes, and folders, careful to put everything back the same way. In the desk she'd taken over for household business, I found a folder marked donations. Inside were receipts, but not all of them were from charities. Some were from antique dealers and estate buyers. One of them, dated 2 weeks before my pearls went missing, had her signature, clear as day. She'd written miscellaneous items, family donation, under description. The total was over $3,000. I took a photo of that, too. Gerald had told me to document everything. "Don't confront them until the file is complete," he said. "We'll use their own paper trail against them." So, I made copies of everything. Receipts, bank withdrawals, emails. I noticed Lawrence's handwriting on several withdrawal slips. Small, neat, the same way he'd written grocery lists as a teenager. That stung the most. He wasn't just turning a blind eye. He was participating. That night, as they watched TV in the living room, I sat quietly at the kitchen table, organizing my stack of proof. Each page I touched made me stronger. I started checking their online activity too. Constance had left her laptop open more than once. I wasn't snooping for gossip. I was looking for evidence. I clicked through her browser history, heart pounding, until I saw emails to a vintage resale broker. The messages talked about estate pieces, quick turnarounds, and urgent sales. In one, she wrote, "The owner doesn't need them anymore. She's practically retired from living." I printed that one out. Twice, I found another message thread between her and her sister, bragging about how she'd sold the old woman's junk to pay off their car loan. My hands shook as I scrolled. The message read, "Lawrence's mom doesn't even notice half her stuff. She's lucky to have us cleaning up her life." And honestly, some of that jewelry looked ridiculous on her anyway. I couldn't believe what I was reading, but it was all there. Her words, her tone, her arrogance. I hit record on my phone and read the messages aloud. Gerald had said that even my voice describing evidence could count if I timestamped it. Each night, I mailed new copies of everything to Gerald's address. I didn't trust keeping them all in the house. After 2 weeks, he called me. "Monica, this is solid. You've got more proof than most cases that end up in court. What's next?" I asked. "Now we watch. The goal isn't to make noise yet. It's to make sure they can't deny any of it when the time comes." He offered to hire a private investigator to trace the jewelry sales. I agreed. The man's name was Clay Thompson. He was polite, soft-spoken, and efficient. Within days, he confirmed what I already suspected. Multiple pawn shops and dealers across Tennessee had purchased items under Constance's name, some even under Lawrence's. He sent me photos of the receipts with their signatures. I added them to my growing folder, proof upon proof, date upon date. I kept everything neat and labeled. I even made a timeline, when each item disappeared, where it was sold, and how much they got for it. It was almost like working again, and that gave me purpose. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was an investigator, calm, patient, precise. One night, I heard them whispering in their room. The door was cracked open, just enough for me to catch fragments. Constance said, "She's starting to act strange lately. Maybe she's catching on." Lawrence muttered something I couldn't hear. She added, "If she does, we'll just say she forgot where she put things. Nobody would question it. She's getting older." That cut deep. I went back to my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and wrote another note to Gerald. They think I'm too old to remember. Let's remind them what 40 years of bookkeeping looks like. A week later, Gerald mailed me a thick envelope. Inside was everything organized, copies of their transactions, listings, even statements from the pawn shops. Attached was a letter that read, "We have enough evidence to confront them on your terms. When you're ready, call me. I'll be there." I folded the letter carefully and placed it on my dresser. Then I looked at the stack of papers beside it. Each sheet felt like a small piece of power I'd reclaimed. People talk about revenge, like it's rage. But for me, it wasn't that. It was math, clear, simple, undeniable. They'd stolen from me, but I had the truth on paper now. And when truth shows up on paper, no one can pretend it didn't happen. I sealed another envelope for Gerald, this time with every last piece of evidence I'd gathered. Before I dropped it in the mailbox, I whispered, "You wanted to take my things, Constance. But you forgot something. You can't steal what's already in my head." Then I turned and walked back to the house, ready for the next step. Because the numbers were balanced now. And soon, so would the scales. Truth on paper feels good, doesn't it? Show me you're still here, hit the like button and share this story so other women know how to keep records that speak louder than excuses. By the time Sunday came, I was ready, not angry, not nervous, just steady. Everything was in place. Gerald had the paperwork. Clay had confirmed every sale, and I had made my choice about how this would end. That morning, I got up early and went to the grocery store. I bought a whole chicken, a bag of sweet potatoes, and a lemon pie from the bakery. It wasn't just any meal, it was Lawrence's favorite. When he was a boy, Sunday dinners were our tradition. Roast chicken, mashed sweet potatoes with brown sugar, and my sweet tea chilled overnight. I wanted this dinner to feel familiar. I wanted them relaxed. When they came downstairs, Constance looked surprised. "Well, doesn't this look nice?" she said, eyeing the kitchen table. "It's been a while since we've had a proper Sunday dinner," I said. "I thought we could eat together, just the three of us." Lawrence smiled, maybe out of guilt, maybe because he wanted to believe things were back to normal. "That sounds great, Mom." Constance poured herself a glass of tea and took a sip. Perfect as always. I set the table while they chatted about work and their weekend plans. Constance mentioned a church auction coming up, and my hands paused over the silverware. She noticed, but kept talking. I told them I'd help with the setup this year. People love when you can find hidden treasures in donations. I smiled slightly. Yes, I imagine they do. The food came out golden and warm, the air rich with the smell of roasted herbs and butter. We sat down, and for a while, it almost felt like the old days. Lawrence told a story from work that made me laugh. Constance complimented my sweet potatoes. I thanked her politely. We moved on to dessert, the lemon pie. I sliced it carefully, placing each piece on the blue china plates Constance hadn't managed to modernize yet. "This is delicious," she said, her fork tapping lightly on the plate. I looked at her for a moment. "I'm glad you like it." The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked loudly. I could hear my heart keeping pace with it. Then, right on time, the doorbell rang. Constance tilted her head. "Are we expecting someone?" "I am," I said, wiping my hands on my napkin. "Excuse me a moment." I walked to the front door and opened it. Gerald stood there, neat as ever, briefcase in hand. He nodded once, and I stepped aside to let him in. Lawrence looked up, confused. "Gerald, what are you doing here?" Constance's smile faltered, just for a second. I took my seat again and said calmly, "Before we finish dessert, let's talk about what else has been served lately. Lies." Lawrence frowned. "Mom, what are you talking about?" Gerald placed his briefcase on the table and opened it. Inside were neatly stacked folders. He handed one to me and kept another for himself. Constance's voice came out sharper than she intended. "This is ridiculous. What is this about?" I looked at her directly. "You know exactly what this is about." I opened the folder in front of me. On top was a printed photo, my diamond brooch shining under the pawn shop lights, the engraving clearly visible. Lawrence's eyes widened. "What is that?" "It's mine," I said. "The same brooch your father gave me for our 10th anniversary. The one that somehow ended up in a pawn shop with Constance's signature on the sales slip." Constance let out a nervous laugh. "That's absurd. Anyone could have." Gerald slid a paper across the table toward her. "This is the receipt from Harris and Tate Antiques in Nashville. Your name, your signature, your phone number." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Lawrence looked between us. "There must be some mistake." "There's no mistake," I said. "And it wasn't just the brooch. The pearls, the sapphire ring, the gold bracelet, all sold, all traced. Even the bank withdrawals line up. Your handwriting, Lawrence. I know it anywhere." He went pale. "Mom, I thought," she said. Constance shot him a glare. Don't say anything. I took a slow breath, keeping my tone even. I gave you both a home. I trusted you. And while I was mourning your father, you were busy emptying my safe and calling it generosity. Constance stood suddenly, her chair scraping the floor. You can't prove any of that. Gerald adjusted his glasses and replied, Actually, Mrs. Williamson can. We have transaction logs, recorded messages, and pawn shop confirmations. Every piece accounted for. Lawrence dropped his fork. It clattered loudly against the plate, breaking the silence. Mom, I'm sorry, he whispered. I didn't look at him right away. I focused on Constance. Her hands were trembling, but her eyes were defiant. You've been planning this, haven't you? She said bitterly, just waiting for a chance to humiliate us. I leaned forward. No, Constance. I was waiting for the truth. And here it is, laid out in black and white. Gerald closed his briefcase. There are two ways this can go, he said evenly. You can return the property and make restitution, or this becomes a criminal matter. Elder financial abuse, to be specific. That's not something the court takes lightly. Constance's lips pressed tight. Lawrence looked like a man caught between drowning and denial. I stood slowly. You called my life junk. You said I didn't need my things because I was too old to care. Well, I care. Not about the jewelry, about the principle. I looked at my son. You helped her take what your father and I built. I don't know if you did it out of weakness or greed, but either way, you're going to make it right. He nodded, eyes down. I will, Mom. I swear. Constance's voice cracked. You can't do this to us. Everyone will know. I met her eyes. Yes, they will. And that's exactly the point. The room went still. I gathered the plates, one by one, setting them neatly in the sink. The small clinks echoed through the kitchen. When I turned back, Gerald was standing near the door, waiting for my cue. Thank you, Gerald, I said softly. We'll handle the rest from here. He gave me a respectful nod. You have everything you need now. As he left, I faced them again. Finish your dessert if you'd like, I said, voice calm. But you'll need to decide what happens next. Constance didn't move. Lawrence sat with his head in his hands. I walked to my room, closed the door, and locked it. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. Instead, I looked at the mirror and said, quietly, now they know who they're dealing with. Because after months of lies and quiet humiliation, I finally had my seat back at the table, and I was the one serving the truth. The silence in that house the next morning was thick enough to touch. I didn't sleep much, but I didn't need to. I had clarity. For months they'd treated me like I couldn't see what was happening right in front of me. Now, I was the one holding all the cards. By Monday afternoon, Gerald had everything ready. He called to confirm. All we need is your word, Monica, he said. Once you give it, we move forward. I gave him my word. That evening, I asked Lawrence and Constance to sit down with me. No dinner this time, just coffee. They looked uneasy, but they came. The folders Gerald had prepared sat neatly on the table. Constance glanced at them. What is this? More accusations. I looked at her calmly. Proof. I thought you might like to see it before we decide how this ends. Gerald sat across from them, silent and watchful. He opened the first folder. Inside were photographs, my jewelry, my heirlooms, the things she called junk. This is ridiculous, she snapped, crossing her arms. He didn't answer her. He opened another folder, laying out the receipts. Sales made in your name, Mrs. Williamson, he said, each signed, dated, and verified by the stores. And these, he added, sliding another sheet across the table, are the bank withdrawals made under your husband's account, Mr. Williamson. Same timing, same pattern. Lawrence's face drained of color. Gerald, please. Gerald held up a hand. Let her respond. Constance leaned back in her chair, forcing a laugh. Anyone could have used my name. This is a misunderstanding. Without a word, Gerald pressed play on a small recorder. A woman's voice filled the room. We got $3,000 for that old woman's jewelry. I swear she doesn't even notice half her stuff. I should have done this sooner. The room went dead quiet. Constance froze. Lawrence covered his face with his hands. That's not, she started, but her voice broke. I spoke softly, but every word landed hard. That's your voice, Constance. And those are my things. You can deny it all you want, but the truth doesn't need you to agree with it. It just exists. Gerald stopped the recording. Lawrence finally looked up, his voice small. Mom, please, what do you want? I looked not at him, but at her. I don't want to press charges. On one condition. Constance's eyes darted toward me. For the first time, she looked afraid. Anything, she said quickly. I'll do anything. I folded my hands. You'll return every single piece, even if you have to buy it back at a loss. I want proof of purchase and receipts for each one. She nodded too fast. Yes, of course. Whatever you want. But I wasn't finished. And then I continued. You'll write a letter. Not to me, to every single member of our church, every woman in your book club, every person you've smiled at these past months pretending to be generous. In that letter, you'll confess exactly what you did, that you stole from your widowed mother-in-law, lied about donating to charity, and used that money for yourself. You'll sign it, and I'll send the copies myself. Her mouth dropped open. What? Lawrence sat up straight. Mom, please. That'll ruin us. I met his eyes. No, Lawrence. You both ruined something else. Trust. I'm not the one who needs to be worried about reputation right now. Constance's face turned red. You're being cruel. You've already humiliated us once with your so-called proof. Isn't that enough? Gerald's voice stayed calm. It's your choice, Mrs. Williamson. Jail or confession. Either way, this becomes public. Lawrence grabbed her hand. Just write the letter, he whispered. She looked at him, shocked. You're siding with her? He didn't answer. He just stared down at the table, defeated. For a moment, I saw my son again, the boy who used to bring me flowers from the yard, not the man who'd looked away while his wife stripped my memories for cash. Constance leaned back in her chair, shaking her head. You wouldn't actually send them. You're bluffing. I didn't blink. Try me. The room stayed, still for what felt like forever. Then, without another word, she stood, walked to the small desk by the window, and pulled out a sheet of paper. Her hand shook as she began to write. When she finished, she slid the page across the table. The words were short, but every one of them hit like a hammer. I, Constance Williamson, took personal possessions from Monica Williamson under false pretenses and lied about their donation to charity. She signed her name at the bottom. Gerald read it, folded it once, and tucked it into his folder. I'll make copies, he said. Tears rolled down Constance's cheeks, but I didn't flinch. You care more about your image than the truth, I said. So I made sure the two of them finally met face to face. Lawrence looked broken. Mom, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. I told him. Just remember this the next time you decide to stand by, and watch wrong happen because it's easier than speaking up. He nodded slowly. I'll fix it. I'll get the jewelry back. I'm not doing this for the jewelry. I said, I'm doing it because I want my home, my peace, and my dignity back. You can't buy those. Constance wiped her face, her voice bitter. You'll regret this. People will talk about you too. I stood. Let them. I've lived long enough to stop caring about whispers. I care about truth. Gerald gathered his folders and closed his briefcase. We're done here, he said. As he left, Lawrence stood to walk him out. Constance stayed seated, staring at her hands. I watched her a moment longer. When the door closed behind them, I said quietly, "You thought you could take what was mine and bury it under lies. But the truth doesn't bury easy, Constance. It always finds its way to the surface." She didn't answer. I walked to the kitchen window and looked out at the yard where the dogwood tree was starting to bloom again. The same tree Frank had planted all those years ago. Behind me, I heard her chair move and her footsteps heading upstairs. Maybe she went a pack, maybe just to hide. It didn't matter. That night, I sat at my desk and reread the letter she'd written. The paper still smelled faintly of her perfume, lavender and guilt. I didn't feel joy. I didn't even feel anger. What I felt was finality. They had taken my trust and turned it into currency. I'd simply made sure the balance was paid in full. Some people might say I went too far. Maybe they're right. Maybe a public confession was harsh. But when someone steals from you and then calls it charity, a quiet apology doesn't cut it. In my world, if you write lies in ink, you correct them the same way. And that night, as I placed the letter into an envelope marked for Gerald, I whispered to myself, justice doesn't always need noise. Sometimes it just needs paper. The next morning, I mailed the copies myself. Some folks will say I went too far. Others will call it justice. What do you call it? Tell me in the comments before you leave. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I'll take it as proof you prefer keeping secrets. But deep down, I know you agree with me. 3 weeks passed before I saw Constance again. During that time, the house felt quieter, lighter somehow. Lawrence moved through the days like a man half there, doing whatever Gerald asked him to do to fix what he could. Then one afternoon, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, Constance stood there holding a small velvet pouch. She looked tired, her perfect hair undone, her makeup gone. She didn't try to come in. She just held out the pouch. "They're all here," she said. "Every single piece." I took the pouch without a word. She lingered a moment, maybe waiting for forgiveness, maybe just afraid of what silence meant. "I sent the letters," she added. "All of them. Church, book club, everyone. I signed every copy like you said." "I know," I said quietly. Gerald confirmed they were mailed. Her eyes filled with tears. "People won't even look at me anymore. I can't go to church. My own sister won't return my calls. You've ruined my life." I met her eyes. "No, Constance, you did that yourself. I just told the truth out loud." She opened her mouth, but no words came. After a moment, she turned and walked back down the porch steps, her heels clicking on the concrete. I watched her get into her car and drive away. I never saw her again. Inside, I set the pouch on the table and opened it. The pearls were on top, just as I remembered them, still smooth, still perfect. The ruby earrings glimmered faintly in the light. Everything was there, even Frank's old gold watch. But something had changed. I didn't feel the same connection I once did. The jewelry was just metal and stones now. The memories they carried were still mine, but they didn't live in those pieces anymore. I put them back in the pouch, tied the drawstring, and drove to the bank. The manager greeted me with a smile. He'd known me for years. "Mrs. Williamson," he said, "what can I help you with today?" "I'd like to open a safe deposit box," I said. He walked me through the process, and within minutes, I was locking the pouch inside. I stood there for a moment, staring at the small metal door. When I left, I didn't feel relief exactly. What I felt was closure. By then, the letters had already spread through town. I didn't read them all. I didn't need to. Friends from church called me, some to check on me, others to say they'd received one and couldn't believe what they read. Lydia came over one afternoon with a hug and a smile. "You always did know how to handle things your way," she said. "I wasn't trying to make a scene," I told her. "I just wanted it to be clear." "Oh, it's clear," she said. Half the women at church are still talking about it, and not one of them thinks you were wrong. Still, I knew not everyone saw it that way. Some people said I went too far, that I should have handled it privately. Others called it poetic justice. I didn't argue with any of them. People will always see what fits their comfort. As for Lawrence, he stayed for a while after Constance left. He helped fix small things around the house, paid back what he could from their sales, and kept mostly to himself. One evening, he came to me with a suitcase by the door. "I'm moving out, Mom," he said. "I need to figure myself out." I looked at him carefully. He'd lost weight, and there were lines on his face I hadn't seen before. "Where will you go?" "An apartment near downtown." He said, "I've already signed the lease. I don't expect you to forgive me right away." I nodded. "You're still my son, Lawrence. That doesn't change. But forgiveness isn't something that happens overnight. You'll have to earn it." He nodded. "I will." Before he left, he handed me an envelope. Inside was a cashier's check, the exact total Gerald had calculated from the pawned items. "I sold my car," he said quietly. "It's what I could do for now." When the door closed behind him, I stood there for a while. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry anymore either, just at peace. Weeks went by, and I started to rebuild my routines. I went back to my morning walks, started volunteering at the community center, and joined a new group at the library that helped seniors learn about financial safety. We talked about things like protecting accounts, recognizing manipulation, and setting up legal safeguards. It felt good to turn what happened to me into something that could protect someone else. I told them, it's not about money, it's about control. Don't ever let anyone talk you into giving up the life you built. Not for convenience, not for comfort, not even for family. The women nodded, and I saw in their faces that they understood. One day after class, a woman named Irene came up to me and said, "You're brave for talking about it. I wish I'd done something like that when my nephew took over my finances." I smiled. It's never too late to take them back. At home, the house finally felt like mine again. The furniture was still the same, but the air was different, cleaner, honest. I put fresh flowers on the table and opened the curtains wide. I'd stopped checking social media months ago, but Lydia told me Constance had deleted her accounts and moved away. No one knew where. Lawrence stayed in town, quiet, working, trying to start over. One afternoon, I sat on the porch watching the neighborhood kids ride their bikes, the sun dipping low in the sky. I thought about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the proof, the confrontation, all of it. I wasn't proud of every part of it. The letters had caused more ripples than I expected. But when I weighed it all, I didn't regret a thing. The jewels had lost their shine for me, but I kept the lesson polished. I'd learned that protecting what's yours isn't selfish, it's necessary. And sometimes doing what's right means standing up even when people will call you cruel for it. I locked my front door that night, turned off the lights, and smiled to myself. I wasn't the woman they thought they could take advantage of anymore. I was Monica Williamson, a woman who'd been counted out, but who balanced every account life handed her. And this one, at last, was settled. A year has passed since that day. The house is quiet again, but this time it's the kind of quiet that feels like peace, not loneliness. Every morning I step out onto the porch with my cup of tea and watch the sunlight hit the rose bushes Frank planted years ago. They've grown wild and full, stubbornly beautiful even after all this time. I trim them once a week and talk to them like old friends. It might sound silly, but keeping them alive feels like keeping a piece of him here. Life has found its rhythm again. I still volunteer at the community center twice a week. The women there tell me their stories, husbands who left them with debt, family members who borrowed and never paid back, children who think they know better. We laugh, sometimes cry, and remind each other that we're stronger than people think. One Tuesday afternoon, the mailman left a single envelope in my box. The handwriting stopped me. I hadn't seen it in months, but I recognized it immediately, Lawrence's. I brought it inside, set it on the table, and just looked at it for a while before opening it. The paper inside was creased, like it had been folded and unfolded many times before he sent it. Mom, it began. He wrote that he was living in a small apartment near downtown, working again, paying off debts. He said he'd gone to church for the first time in months and finally understood what humility really meant. He didn't ask for forgiveness right away. He said he didn't deserve it yet, but that he hoped one day I might see that he was trying to become the kind of man his father would have been proud of. At the end, he wrote, "I'm sorry for every moment I stood by and let you be disrespected. I was raised better than that, and I lost my way. I hope someday you'll want to see me again." I sat there for a long time, reading it over and over. Then I folded it neatly and placed it in the top drawer of my desk, next to the last photo I took of him and Frank together. I smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind that comes from understanding that love doesn't disappear. It just changes shape. Forgiveness isn't a gift, it's earned. A few days later, I went to the bank to check on the deposit box. The manager greeted me kindly and led me to the small room in the back. When I opened the box, the same velvet pouch sat there, untouched. I didn't open it this time. I just rested my hand on it for a moment. Jewels can be replaced. Respect cannot. That's what this whole year has taught me. People will take what you allow them to take. Your time, your trust, your peace. But once you set a boundary, once you remind them who you are, you never have to raise your voice. I've thought about Constance a few times. Last I heard, she left Tennessee and moved somewhere near Atlanta. Someone at church mentioned she was working part-time and keeping to herself. I don't hate her. I don't think about revenge anymore. I think about what happens when people put pride above decency and how easily it can all fall apart. When I look back now, I see it all clearly. The moment she called my things junk, the way Lawrence looked away, the empty velvet box. All of it was a test, not of my patience, of my strength. And I passed it. Some might say I went too far with those letters. Others say it was justice. I've stopped trying to defend my choices. I did what I needed to do to get my life back. Now, I choose quiet over chaos, truth over appearances, and peace over pretending everything is fine. Every Friday, I still make sweet tea, just like I used to. I sit out in the yard at sunset, watching the neighborhood kids race their bikes up and down the street. Sometimes Lydia joins me, and we talk about the old days, our husbands, our kids, the things we wish we'd said sooner. She asked me once if I'd ever let Lawrence move back in. I told her, not yet, maybe one day, but for now he needs to rebuild his own home before stepping into mine again. That seemed to make sense to her. The truth is, I'm not angry anymore. I'm grateful. I found parts of myself I'd forgotten existed. Strength, patience, clarity, all things that got buried under years of keeping peace for other people. Now, when I look in the mirror, I see the same woman Frank fell in love with, calm, capable, and sure of who she is. I wear my wedding pendant again, sometimes, not for show, but as a reminder. It's a small gold locket with a picture of us inside. Every time I touch it, I whisper, "You were right, Frank. Dignity is worth more than anything." And for anyone watching or listening to my story right now, I'll say this: protect your peace. Don't wait for someone to hand it back to you after they've taken it. Stand up for yourself. Even if your voice shakes a little when you do, people might call you harsh. They might call you unforgiving, but one day they'll call you wise. Before I end this, I want to ask you something. What would you have done? Would you have let her confess publicly or kept it private? Tell me in the comments, because I want to hear what you think. And if this story made you feel something, if it reminded you of your own strength or someone you know who's been through something similar, go ahead and like this video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I have plenty more to tell. Don't forget to download this wonderful book called 38 Uplifting and Funny Short Stories for Seniors. Easy-to-read tales that bring laughter, memories, and mental stimulation. It's full of heartwarming, simple stories written to bring a smile, stir up memories, and remind us that joy doesn't fade with age. It grows stronger. You'll find it in the pinned comment below. Lastly, sometimes the hardest lessons don't come from what we lose. They come from what we refuse to let go of. And that's the last lesson I'll leave you with today.